From the nation's capital, Eye on Washington with Marilee Joyce. A weekly discussion about the federal issues most important to Nevada. And now, from Washington, D.C., here's Marilee Joyce.
Good day to you. I'm Marilee Joyce. This is Eye on Washington, the only statewide Nevada news program produced in Washington, D.C. Every week, Eye on Washington takes you straight to Capitol Hill for a discussion with Nevada's delegation and other leaders about the federal matters that matter to you. Today's topic, he is a seeker of justice in the House of Representatives. We'll tell you about one Nevada U.S. congressman and an attorney's role on the committee that oversees all matters judicial. He is my guest today, Nevada U.S. Congressman Mark Amodei. Well, it's been called the guardian of the Constitution and the lawyer of the House. It is the House Judiciary Committee. And today on Eye on Washington, we'll tell you why my guest certainly qualifies for membership. We'll tell you why he pushed so hard for a piece of legislation just passed by that committee. And we'll tell you about a hearing it just held for a bill that is hugely important to Nevada. Let's start out by telling you what it is and what it does. The jurisdiction of the House Judiciary Committee often places it at the center of American politics, such as when it approved the USA Patriot Act following the terrorist attacks of 9/11, or when it considered impeachment charges against U.S. presidents in 1974 and in 1998. It has been called the lawyer for the House, as I mentioned, because of its jurisdiction over matters relating to the administration of justice in federal courts, administrative bodies, and law enforcement agencies. It began in 1813 as a standing committee on the judiciary to consider legislation relating to judicial proceedings, and since then its scope of concern has expanded to include not only civil and criminal judicial proceedings and federal courts and judges, but also issues relating to bankruptcy, espionage, terrorism, the protection of civil liberties, constitutional amendments, immigration naturalization, also interstate compacts, claims against the U.S., national penitentiaries, presidential succession, antitrust law, state and territorial boundary lines, almost done, patents, copyrights, trademarks, among other issues. Congressman, sorry that was long, but boy, it's a lot of judicial stuff. It's no wonder that the site mentions normally the case the members are lawyers.
And I didn't realize it till I got there, but there's 35 plus committee members, and many of them are actually former judges also. So
well, you guys consider a ton of bills. We're going to get to the number you guys consider. I want to look now, first of all, what's the importance of this committee and why did you ask to serve on it?
Well, it actually, I didn't ask. It was one of those things where they said, if you win your special, we've got a slot there that we're thinking about putting you in, because there were some vacancies on the committee. And I think it was because of the background in terms of being a special assistant U.S. attorney, former president pro tem of the state senate, chaired the Judiciary Committee. So it was like just some qualifications that I think probably, since they didn't really know me or they would have thought different, said, on paper, this guy looks like he might be a good fit.
Well, we're going to say so, and you're the lawyer. So that fits too. I got to most of its jurisdictional responsibilities, but I wanted to save a couple for the Q&A, and they're pretty big. It's your oversight of the Justice Department and the Homeland Security Department.
Yep, big. It's a balancing act with a lot of stuff. Most of that stuff you mentioned is stuff
Patriot
that gets you in a lot of trouble with one side or the other, or both at the same time, or even a fourth or fifth side. But in this day and age, post 9/11, when you talk about the balance between national security and individual liberties, it's always a lively discussion.
And it's balancing constitutional rights with Homeland Security, right?
Yep.
Isn't that a big part of it?
Yep. And you know what? I'll tell you what. You can't roll in there and just figure, we'll just kind of figure it out as we go. It requires a lot of thought in terms of how do you balance that, thinking about the competing interests, those sorts of things, to try to do some justice, no pun intended, to the issues that are usually vociferously contested. It
is a very busy committee. I read that in just the last Congress, 1,000 bills were referred to you guys. What's a day in the life on that committee?
Well, you know what? It depends. I mean, the hearings are pretty nice, but the work sessions, the mock-ups, can get to be kind of marathon sort of things.
Explain to our listeners and viewers what a mock-up is.
Well, that's where you have a bill that's been heard, and so it's time, are we going to pass it or are we not going to pass it? There are always amendments offered, so amendments have to be discussed, debated, voted up or down, that sort of thing. And so, by the time some of these, the Violence Against Women Act, one that went through just a few weeks ago, was very cantankerous in terms of potential amendments and passage and discussion of those amendments.
Yeah, and I want to talk about that bill in our next segment, but you guys, not only do you consider a whole lot of bills, but it is big stuff. Just last year, according to the committee site, you've gotten bills on terrorism, crime, immigration, bankruptcy, civil liberties, constitutional amendments, and patents and copyrights, just to name some.
Yep. One of the ones that was interwoven in there that's going to be coming up again, Marilee, is some people call it Main Street or e-fairness, and that's should the internet be taxed the same as the folks on Main Street in your community that sell various goods or services, all the way up to automobiles even now. So,
as far as that bill, what's the feeling out in Nevada on that from your constituents?
Well, you know what? It's we've done some unofficial polling during our telephone town halls, and when you ask anybody, if you buy something on the internet, do you think you should be taxed the same as if you bought it at Lowe's or Home Depot in the case of the barbecue example? Most people, the human nature is, heck no, I don't want to pay taxes if I don't have to. So it'll be an interesting discussion. Although, once again, it's your head on a swivel, 360 degrees. Sure. What's the right thing for the bricks and mortar people employing folks in your town, competing with those folks on the internet?
As we wrap up this segment, are you able to tell us any interesting news from proceedings on, say, I don't know, terrorism or crime or something interesting for our listeners?
You know what? One that always gets people fired up, we're going to have the Attorney General back in front of the committee, I think within the next month, for another oversight hearing, and that's always been exciting. We've had Janet Napolitano there for oversight purposes, and so when you start talking about the Department of Justice, whether it be the Attorney General, the FBI, any of those sorts of folks, then it's always a full attendance day.
Well, when we come back, we are going to talk about that Violence Against Women Act and how the congressman's daughters kind of influenced his thinking on pushing so hard for it. It's right after this.
You're watching Eye on Washington with Marilee Joyce, brought to you by the National Mining Association, Caesars Entertainment, the Las Vegas Convention and Visitors Authority, NV Energy, Western Lithium Corporation, the Frias Companies, the Nevada Mining Association, Skyline Restaurant and Casino, and the Regional Transportation Commission of Washoe County.
America's minerals have made us a nation of self-reliant dreamers, shaping our world and the endless ways we enjoy it. But red tape often forces us to import more than half the minerals we depend on. Minerals we already have. We don't import our dreams. Shouldn't that go for our minerals too? The National Mining Association. Learn more at nma.org.
You already watch Eye on Washington with Marilee Joyce, Nevada's only statewide program produced in Washington, D.C. But for even more news from Capitol Hill that affects you, your family, and your business, you need to read Nevada's Washington Watch, our online newsletter. In-depth reporting on federal efforts that impact you. Our exclusive Inside the Beltway column, putting a microscope on Nevada's congressional delegation. Guest editorials about what Nevada needs from the Hill. Nevada's Washington Watch, your watch on Washington. Subscribe today at nevadaswashingtonwatch.com.
Heads we go, tails we stay. A coin flip. That's how it all began for what is now Nevada's largest transportation provider. Charlie Frias, with a can-do spirit and support of his loving wife Phyllis, bought ABC Union Cab in 1966. They then parlayed 5 cabs into a fleet of nearly 1,000. And today, Frias has over 2,000 employees and was recently voted Las Vegas's best company to work for. Frias, safe, reliable, simply the best.
So, I got this new family, and I don't know what it is about this one, but she can't seem to put down that toy all day long. Tap, 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 tap. Oh, and she even talks to it. She talks to that more than she talks to him. What's up, bro? Nice shirt. Who's she talking to? Her mom? She talks to her mom a lot.
And welcome back to Eye on Washington, our discussion of my guest's role on the House Judiciary Committee. And we've been visiting with him, of course, Nevada U.S. Congressman Mark Amodei. Let's focus this segment on a recent example of legislation that passed out of the committee and for which my guest was a big advocate. When he voted for the Violence Against Women Reauthorization Act, Congressman Amodei mentioned his own close relationship with his two daughters as an impetus behind his becoming one of the bill's original co-sponsors. The legislation is designed to prevent and prosecute violence against intimate partners with language that does not exclude victims of any age, race, sexual orientation, or background. The original Violence Against Women Act was signed into law in 1994. It established within the Departments of Justice and Health and Human Services a number of grant programs for state, local, and tribal governments. Current bill would provide a 5-year reauthorization of each of them. Its funding assists groups like the Reno-based National Council of Juvenile and Family Court Judges, whose mission is to train judges to understand the unique dynamics of domestic violence and to provide appropriate legal relief to victims and their family. And in a statement about the bill, the congressman said, quote, "As the father of two daughters, this legislation is very important to me. It increases resources for investigations, prostitutions, and victim services while strengthening penalties and promoting educational awareness to prevent violence from occurring in the first place." You know, you mentioned your daughters. This bill was a big deal to you.
You know, it's just, it's one of those things culturally that we've been working on for a long time now in this country, and this just kind of moves it the next step forward in terms of, I don't want to say making it routine, but it's something that shouldn't be part of the culture, and so I'm happy to lend my efforts to making sure that it's something that becomes very clearly taboo, and the resources are there to enforce it.
Good for you. You know, you also pointed out something else important to you. It's sort of a theme you've mentioned here on Eye on Washington several times, and that's governmental accountability. And your exact quote was, "And because good intentions are not good enough, this version of the bill would help ensure taxpayer resources go to help victims rather than to Washington folks."
Yep, and you know, once again, it's put the resources out on the ground, out on the street, out in the communities where if you really want to make a difference, that's, you know, those are the folks who gave you the job.
You know, let's look at the bill's impact on Indian tribes. I saw it would address concerns raised by Indian tribes that federal prosecutors are failing to pursue cases against non-Indians who commit abuse on tribal lands. Tell us about that.
Well, there was a jurisdiction problem in terms of, in order to be subject to tribal courts, you have to be Native American, and if you're not Native American and you commit one of these offenses on a reservation, there was a question on whether or not the U.S. Attorney was equipped to handle those sort of things. And so what we tried to do was make sure that circumstance, which had been pretty much perceived as a loophole, was closed, so that it's like, you know, it doesn't matter whether the act happens to occur on an Indian reservation or exclusive federal jurisdiction or concurrent federal jurisdiction, sure, that it's like, hey, it's the act that drives it, and the resources will be there to meet it regardless of who's got jurisdiction over the real estate.
What did you hear from tribes in your congressional district, and what assurances can you give them if this bill passes?
You know what, it was on their radar screens when I talked with the Washoe, with the folks up in Elko, the Miwoks, some of the various branches of the Paiute tribes around the state. It was all something that they had brought to on part of their agendas. And you know, an interesting thing, Marilee, is right now as you look around, there are quite a few women in tribal council chairwomanship positions. Sure. So I mean, they were fully engaged and right there in the middle of the fray in terms of bringing that to the fore.
Do you think that the fact that there are more chairwomen has made this issue, I don't know, come to the forefront more for the Indian tribes?
You know, I've been here 8 months, so my history doesn't go back on it a long way, but I can assure you that there's absolutely no doubt that it's right up there in the top half of the radar screen on every one of them. What's
the most important thing about this act?
You know, I think it continues work that was started, probably 20 years ago in earnest, when we talked about special training as a result of the O.J. Simpson stuff. That was kind of a watershed for the issue, even though there were other ones. And so it's not a flash in the pan. I think it's good. It's like, this is an ongoing thing that needs to be dealt with in a teamwork effort, and that is federal, state, and local.
Okay, when we come back, we're going to talk more about the House Judiciary Committee, and we're going to tell you about a bill that was considered by it that at first blush you're going to say, why was that bill considered by that committee? But we're going to explain, and that's right after this.
Every day, thousands of people in northern Nevada don't get enough to eat. 1 out of 5 children in northern Nevada go to bed hungry every night. But you can do something about it. Catholic Community Services of Northern Nevada has been providing help and creating hope in our community for more than 65 years. By donating food, time, or money, you can make a difference in a hungry person's life. When you make your generous donation to St. Vincent's Dining Room and St. Vincent's Food Pantry, you're helping to fight the scourge of hunger in Northern Nevada. In these tough economic times, now more than ever, we need to help those less fortunate. To find out how you can donate to St. Vincent's Dining Room and St. Vincent's Food Pantry, call, click, or stop by, and together we can end hunger in Northern Nevada.
Thanks to an ongoing commitment by America's mining companies, more than 2 million acres already have been reclaimed. To learn more about reclamation or other aspects of mining, visit nma.org, the National Mining Association.
You already watch Eye on Washington with Marilee, Joyce, Nevada's only statewide program produced in Washington, D.C. But for even more news from Capitol Hill that affects you, your family, and your business, you need to read Nevada's Washington Watch, our online newsletter. In-depth reporting on federal efforts that impact you. Our exclusive Inside the Beltway column, putting a microscope on Nevada's congressional delegation. Guest editorials about what Nevada needs from the Hill. Nevada's Washington Watch, your watch on Washington. Subscribe today at nevadaswashingtonwatch.com.
Heads we go, tails we stay. A coin flip. That's how it all began for what is now Nevada's largest transportation provider. Charlie Frias, with a can-do spirit and support of his loving wife Phyllis, bought ABC Union Cab in 1966. They then parlayed 5 cabs into a fleet of nearly 1,000. And today, Frias has over 2,000 employees and was recently voted Las Vegas's best company to work for. Frias, safe, reliable, simply the best.
When it comes to state-of-the-art energy, Nevada is the right state to be in. A reliable, efficient network. Cleaner energy resources like solar, wind, and geothermal. And technology that will help you save energy and money at home. Learn more at nvenergy.com.
And welcome back to Eye on Washington. We're discussing my guest's role on the House Judiciary Committee and why you in Nevada should care that he's on it. And he is my guest today, of course, Nevada U.S. Congressman Mark Amodei. Well, let's look now at just one very good reason that many of you should be happy the congressman serves on the Judiciary Committee. And it regards a bill that by its name you wouldn't expect to be considered by the committee. Last fall, my guest colleague, Nevada U.S. Congressman Joe Heck, introduced the Welcoming Business Travelers and Tourists to America Act. The bill seeks to improve the State Department's tourist visa system while maintaining national security standards. Between the years 2000 and 2010, the global long-haul travel market grew by 40%. But the U.S. share fell by 17 to 12%. And Congressman Heck blames that on an outdated, inefficient tourist visa application process. He says his bill would generate as much as $859 billion in economic output, would allow the U.S. to regain the share of international travel lost over the past 10 years, and create 1 million jobs at no cost to taxpayers. Well, that's all well and good for Nevada. But just before we tape today's program, Congressman Heck had to appear before the Judiciary Committee on his tourism bill. Well, why would that be? Well, the bill seeks to speed up the process for tourism business visas, and the committee has jurisdiction over visas and immigration. And Congressman, I got to admit, I was surprised when I was researching for the show that your friend, the congressman, came before you on a tourism bill.
Yep.
But given the jurisdiction of your committee, I guess I shouldn't be so surprised.
That's right. That's right. Immigration, visas, the whole bit.
Yeah. There are a couple others that recently came before you don't seem judiciary related at first glance. Here's a couple. Geolocational Privacy and Surveillance Act, which sounds more like something Natural Resources would take a look at. Or Preserving Our Hometown Independent Pharmacies Act. Or how about New Jobs in Recession and Recovery? Who's getting them and who are not? Now, what about those as a kind of a legal end or a judicial end? Well,
when you look at many of those, I'm not familiar intimately with all the ones you listed off, but many of them, you have import issues, you have immigration issues, you have visa visitor issues, you have national security issues, you have trademark and copyright issues. that all go through the Judiciary Committee. So you end up with some pretty far-flung jurisdictional areas.
Just to help our Nevada TV and radio audience understand, a bill would not go through two separate committees. It would be assigned to one committee that has most of the say over it, or
well, actually,
explain.
It can go to two committees, but if it's in front of Judiciary, for example, and the Judiciary jurisdiction is patent and trademark, then that's what our review would be confined to. If it has a financial impact, then it would perhaps be at Ways and Means, and they would look at the financial stuff.
But it wouldn't go to both.
Yeah, it could.
Oh, okay.
It could.
It could go to both. Well, we're all learning today. So again, the bills I mentioned, you wouldn't necessarily think they'd go to Judiciary, but they all bear on something covered by the committee, which kind of makes clear why you get 1,000 bills referred to you guys a year.
There's no shortage of stuff to discuss, argue about, and vote on.
You serve on public lands, the natural resources, veterans, and Judiciary. Which committee is the busiest?
You know what, probably, and you've hit on it, Judiciary is the busiest in terms of sheer volume. Natural Resources is a busy committee, but it goes heavy and lighter, and then Veterans goes kind of steady the whole time, but not with the workload of Judiciary.
Here's just a few that I just wanted to tell our audience about because they just sound interesting. This is some that you've heard. The state of religious liberty in the United States, cybersecurity, protecting America's new frontier, and utilizing DNA technology to solve the Cold Cases Act. That is interesting stuff, isn't it?
Yep, and it's all of those are ones where you talk about, is there a role for the federal government? What is the appropriate role? How do you pay for it, and how does that assist your folks at the state and local level?
You know, I mentioned that the average is 1,000 bills come before you guys a year. I imagine not all of them get a hearing. How does that work?
You know what, that's the chairman, that's a function of the interplay. I can tell you what my experience is. The interplay between the member staff and the committee staff and the chair in terms of, these are my priorities, this is what I'd like to see you move on, or are there opportunities to amend those legitimately onto other pieces? So it's a pretty dynamic moving target sort of thing in terms of getting your stuff either up on agenda or up for amendment.
And that's pretty much your typical hearing day.
Yep.
We're going to be right back with our mailbag segment. It's right after this.
All of us at Caesars Entertainment have something we want to say.
Play responsibly.
Play responsibly. We don't want you to gamble if you've had too much to drink.
You shouldn't gamble if you're lonely or depressed.
And if you're under 21, you're not allowed to play.
No.
No matter which of our casinos you come to, our message is always the same.
Play responsibly.
Play responsibly.
Play responsibly. We know you're coming to our casinos to have a good time, and we always want you to leave feeling like you did.
America's minerals have made us a nation of self-reliant dreamers, shaping our world and the endless ways we enjoy it. But red tape often forces us to import more than half the minerals we depend on. Minerals we already have. We don't import our dreams. Shouldn't that go for our minerals too? The National Mining Association. Learn more at nma.org.
Built on a fleet of just 5 cabs bought in 1966 by founder Charlie Frias, Frias Transportation is now Nevada's largest transportation provider. Today, Frias has a fleet of nearly 1,000 vehicles and more than 2,000 employees. As an industry and community leader, Frias continues to create the future of transportation technology and management and actively supports the community, continuing the legacy of quality service in the Las Vegas Valley. Simply the best. Thanks to an ongoing commitment by America's mining companies, more than 2 million acres already have been reclaimed. To learn more about reclamation or other aspects of mining, visit nma.org, the National Mining Association.
And we're back with our closing segment of Eye on Washington. It is our mailbag segment. In this segment, we tell you about an issue the congressional mailbag page of the Joyce Communications website has been getting a lot of correspondence about. We read one of your letters on the air, and we invite our guests to respond to you right here. And Congressman, your office has been hearing lately about a variety of mining issues, and I have a letter here to you from William R. of Elko. He writes, Dear Congressman Amodei, how will the mineral production and Indian lands energy bills affect the mining and energy production industries in Nevada? What do you say to William?
Oh, it sounds like William's been doing some of his homework. The mineral production bills, we've got a series of 5 that we've been working on in the Natural Resources Committee. One of the 5 was mine about permitting times that put a 30-month limit on permitting times for industrial metals, rare earth metals production in the country, so it would be competitive with competitors outside of our borders in our nation. So if that gets through this, as with everything, Marilee, if it gets through the Senate and gets through the House, then the idea is to strengthen our industry here, make it more competitive in terms of with its international competitors, and get that stuff going where it's like, listen, and that doesn't mean that everything gets a permit. It just means whether it does or doesn't within 30 months. So that hearing went well. In the committee level, the committee passed it out, so that'll be coming up on the House floor. So I think that's a good thing.
Has a lot of support in both the House and the Senate?
Well, we'll find out about the Senate. I'm still new, so I'm not sure what the communications protocols there are, but I'm learning more every day. So maybe we can do a segment on that sometime in the future. But anyhow, in terms of the energy production, that's part of also that series of 5 bills where we're trying to strengthen those, not ignore environmental responsibility, but make those more responsive to what are the facts, and let's get down the road. And if the answer is no, then you get no quickly, and if it's yes, then you get yes quickly. So that we can continue to compete to maximize our resources in an environmentally responsible manner. The Indian element of that, though, in terms of reservations is interesting, because once that land goes into reservation, it's an issue we're looking at. The Duckwater tribe in central Nevada wants to expand their reservation. Once that land becomes part of the reservation, it's subject to the jurisdiction of the federal government mining or energy production thing. It is not subject to that anymore. So that's something to think about. That allows the tribes to make deals directly with, for instance, a mining company or an energy company or something like that. So provides an interesting dynamic in terms of where those lands are in Nevada, what are the resources there, and also how is that going to fit in when you have surrounding federal lands that have permitting requirements, have to think about things like the sage hen, have to think about all that sort of stuff. A lot of moving parts to that question.
Quickly, when you were here last winter talking about your Western Caucus Committee, you mentioned a big focus of yours is energy production. What are you working on there?
Well, the Natural Resources Committee, as part of that series of bills, is talking about, we spent a lot of time with the Keystone Pipeline. We spent a lot of time with outer continental shelf issues, ANWR, the Arctic National Wildlife Refuge, drilling issues there that were meant to pay for part of the highway bill. When you talk about Nevada, Marilee, as the especially CD2, but the state in general, largest number of centerline miles per inhabitant in the nation. That means we got a lot of roads for not a lot of people because we're spread out and it's a big state. So energy policy is of critical importance when you talk about anything, whether it's moving mining supplies into the mines, product out of them, getting resources to our urban centers in Las Vegas or Reno Sparks. So transportation and energy to bring that transportation about is on it all day, every day in terms of trying to make the state competitive.
Well, thanks for being here on this again. I think we better have you on energy next time.
Okay.
You should send a letter to the Joyce Communication website, and we'll have him answer another question from you. And you should be sure to like Eye on Washington on Facebook and read our Nevada's Washington Watch newsletter for the very latest from Capitol Hill that matters most to you. Thanks for joining us today on Eye on Washington. I'm Marilee Joyce in Washington, D.C. Have a great day.